I was living in Asia and I survived the tsunami in Indonesia. I was working in the Maldives at the time in the middle of this disaster, and I heard very clairaudiently, turn left. I was clinging to a pole in front of a collapsing building. There was water all around me, and I turned left and I survived. I will say the biggest shift for me was I live in Italy, so it was near where I live. I just spontaneously one Sunday I went up to Lake Como and I was walking on the lake. I looked up in the sky and there was a massive ship in the sky. I never imagined I would see that, and to this day, it was still quite astonishing. But my entire worldview kind of collapsed because suddenly I realized, okay, we were not alone, and what was happening was real.
Okay, David, go ahead.
Hi, I'm David Patrick, and this is Your Superior Self.
David, my man, thank you so much for taking the time. I have to say, you being on this show seems like divine timing, and a divine plan was definitely initiated and executed here. I reached out to you right after our dog Gracie passed away, and a good friend of mine, Jen, highly recommended you, and you kind of helped us get through a really tough time in my life. So thank you for that, my friend, and thank you for taking the time.
You're welcome. I wish we could have met under different circumstances, but yeah, Gracie was a big impact in your life and will continue to be so now through your new addition. So I'm happy that I could have helped you, but again, I wish we could have met under different circumstances.
Yeah, for sure. But it's funny how these things kind of work themselves out, or the people that you meet along that way and that path, when things, tragic events happen, and then all of a sudden people come into your life, or things just connect and help you along the way. I know you I didn't know a whole lot about your background, but you were connecting with Gracie, being an animal communicator, and then giving us messages that really resonated and hit with us. So I said that I had to have you on the show just to kind of talk about your background. So let's give some context. What How did this start for you? How did you start talking to animals?
Well, I mean, I've been intuitive since I was a child. I think a lot of people can relate to that. And I think a lot of people also shut it down through various reasons. Perhaps it's religion or parenting or just life experience. So when I was a child, I could hear animal thoughts. I didn't think that it was unusual. I thought it felt quite normal to me as a child. I grew up with several dogs, and we always were able to communicate back and forth. Nature a little bit so much, but not so much as animals. But with dogs and cats, I was able to really hear what they were thinking, and a lot of the adults around me didn't quite have the same connection. I shut it down for about 15 years, I would say, until about 2004. I was living in Asia and I survived the tsunami in Indonesia. I was working in the Maldives at the time, but I was in the middle of this disaster, and I heard very clairaudiently, turn left. And I was clinging to a pole in front of a collapsing building. There was water all around me, and I turned left and I survived. Had I turned right was where a lot of the damage was, and a lot of the destruction and injuries occurred. So it was the first time I remember hearing clairaudiently something very visceral and something that paid off, paying attention to it and listening to it. And in the disaster, while I was there for several days, I was put into a leadership position that I'd never been trained for. And I learned later that, source was flowing through me. I didn't make a mistake. I had no shoes. I didn't step on broken glass. I felt I made every decision I could make for those who needed it in that experience. So I also found out years later that the voice was my grandfather, and the guidance was actually source when I surrendered. I surrendered and was, put into a triage situation. I had to manage people that were losing their minds because we were in the middle of the Indian Ocean. We had 8, massive waves, a resort that had no food or water or electricity or telephone for a couple of days. So that was kind of the biggest shift for me in like 2004. So it's been a slow ride since then. For about 15 years after that, not much really happened. And more in context too, I lived in Asia for about 14 years during that Maldives experience. And a lot of times I would feel spirits touching me. I would hear voices. I would see spirits. I was living in Thailand and Vietnam. And my friends who I would tell these stories to would say to me, that's not really normal. I don't have that experience of being woken up at 1 o'clock in the morning every night. Because for years I was being woken up at 1 a.m. and I never figured out who it was until years later. But it was clear that I was more open than most. So that was kind of the context. But the tsunami was really where it really clicked into place, like something was working here. But it was the pandemic in 2020 when the mediumship really began to develop, and I was getting messages. And I don't know if you've ever driven in a remote area in the US where you can hear like phantom radio stations on your radio player. I'm not sure if anyone can relate to that, but you're out in Montana or Alaska or somewhere, and you can hear in the background other radio stations playing through. And in the beginning, the mediumship felt like that. I could hear conversations, I could hear messages. And then they began to be clear. Please tell this person, please give this message to that person. People I didn't even know. And again, that was around the pandemic and couldn't really do much because we were all locked down. But around 2021, things began to get really strong. And that's when the mediumship was actually showing me the payoff of bringing through information that was being validated by people, because that's kind of where a lot of us get caught up with intuition. We don't trust it because we don't believe it. But when you're bringing through information as a medium and you get that confirmation, that mother who comes through wearing a nurse's uniform, my mother was a nurse for 30 years. Okay. I can see your father pinning a corsage on your mother. Were they high school sweethearts? Yes, they met when they were 16. Those kind of details help you build a foundation of trust in intuition. I think that's the biggest thing that is difficult with intuition, is trusting what's coming through. But for me, the mediumship really helped build a foundation for other things like channeling, light language, etc. Had that come first, I probably would have shut it down completely because it was quite weird. But the mediumship really helped with, that's just that foundation of trust. So
Sure. Yeah. Wow. Yeah, that's totally amazing. For sure. Talk about like a moment of discernment for yourself, like, turn left instead of right, and then having to trust that. It completely blows my mind.
yeah, it was in the middle of just water up to my chest. There was broken wood and glass all around me. And I was like, I had no idea what to do. And I just completely surrendered. I mean, I didn't know
Sure.
what to do next. And it was just one of those situations. I mean, if you talk to anyone who's been in a disaster or in that tsunami itself, there's a level of fear that you just can't even begin to comprehend. I mean, people I've talked to afterwards, we kind of shared that same fear. But yeah, in the middle of it, I didn't know what to do, and just had this impulse, turn left. I went towards the reception area, and I was washed past two big, massive windows that were caving in as I was being washed past, grabbed the counter, hung on, and then began to help people when the water went down. Yeah.
Sure. I wonder if it's like something about being straight into like survival mode almost that allows us to tap into something.
Yeah, I think it is just an intense form of surrender, really. You just give up. You pretty much just give in. I mean, I think
Mm.
part of your brain kind of goes, well, I'm going to die and I can't do much else about it. So
Wow.
you pretty much
Yeah.
just
Like
let
I
go.
didn't, yeah, like surrender. All right, this is my last moment that I'm gonna be here. So, and then you hear this voice turn left.
Mm,
That's pretty powerful. I don't know if I've ever experienced moments like that. I've heard people speak, on this show about near death experiences. But as far as people, there actually was one guy who came on and said that he had a near death experience where he was drowning and he had this moment of like surrender. And then that's when he had an
mm.
experience. So, like, what does that surrender feel like?
Well, for me, my mind was trying to find exits, and each exit it was trying to go down were just blocked. Do I go this way? Do I go that way? Do I do this? Do I do that? Nothing was, there was no solutions that were viable or safe. I mean, when you're hanging onto a pole and there's water all around you, the power of the tsunami is something you can't even begin. I mean, I'm a strong swimmer. I'm also 6'4". I'm 195 centimeters tall and a very strong swimmer. And I can tell you that there was nothing you could do. And I think when your mind tries to find those exits and just doesn't find it, you just kind of go, that's it. And I did feel to a certain degree like my soul was being guided away from my body. It wasn't an out of body experience, but it was definitely a feeling of, well, this is how I'm going to go. And you better just hang on and do the best you can. When we were helping people that were injured, we knew there were more waves coming, and we pretty much just said, look, let's just do as much as we can for as long as we can until the waves come. And that's all we were kind of focused on for a couple of hours, of just doing triage, stopping the bleeding, getting people back together with families, etc., and just waiting for the wave to come and kind of either wash us away, or we didn't know what was coming. But yeah, it was a very intense couple of hours. Yeah.
Sure. I can imagine like those types of events, what we're experiencing now in the US with LA and the wildfires, like people just total chaos. And yeah, I've never been like the closest thing that like confusion and kind of like fear and anxiety, that type of, heightened to that height. I think the only thing that comes close is my experience, like 2001, 9/11, when I was in college, and then having, being in Delaware, and then not being that far from New York, but everyone kind of in this state of panic, really puts things in perspective. Like I think it shakes us out of this freaking like routine that we get in, like the daily grind. It has to, like, you have to get out of that, right? And you have to start thinking about like, how do I survive? Like basic survival. And it's a shame that it takes tragedies like this to like kind of shake us out of this freaking like sleep that we're in, to like realize the importance and quality of life, the quality of life, life in itself. It's just a shame that we have to live through these travesties just, to freaking understand like the importance of life and how sacred it is. And then when you're at that moment of surrender, I'm sure, I don't know, I don't want to project this on you, but I can only imagine like the thoughts that are going through your mind about life in general. Like, did I live my purpose? Am I doing my purpose? Like, what is my purpose?
Yeah. I think, those experiences, although in the moment don't come across that way, but they do come through in hindsight, is that you are actually being rebalanced. You're absolutely correct. They're rebalancing you into a more natural state. Surrender is actually balance. Surrender is not giving up. A lot of us think of surrender as caving in or whatever, but actually surrender is actually allowing yourself to be balanced. And this is what I do with clients now. I remind them of that inner balance that exists within them. The channeling, etc. I'm channeling Yeshua and Mary Magdalene. They didn't come through together in the beginning, but they do now, because they're reminding us of this balance that exists within us that we have forgotten. And now that we're opening our hearts again, the natural balance is coming out, that masculine, feminine balance that is actually innate in all of us, but has been forgotten or distorted through our experiences. So surviving, you don't need to survive a massive disaster like the tsunami. I mean, 230,000 people lost their lives in a matter of hours. It was an extreme example, but you do have life experiences. You could lose a job, etc., where you are being rebalanced. It is always, like you heard that quote before, life happens through you. It's not to you, it's happening for you and through you. So It's always rebalancing. It does take a while for a disaster of that magnitude to be seen in that light. But eventually you kind of come around and go, okay, I can talk about it through the eyes of the clairaudience and the guidance, and not the gore and the terror of it, because that was kind of the story of it in the beginning, and people wanted to know what it was like. And you kind of make yourself out into a victim, and victim is separation, and unity is not. So that's kind of what humanity is moving towards, is that unity, and understanding underneath the story is that unity that's eternal. Yeah.
So when you started hearing, speaking to past loved ones, is that strictly, when did you realize that you were receiving information from higher councils or ascended masters, or even like, different intelligences or civilizations?
Sure.
Like
the mediumship came through first, and there was no channeling of that kind at the time. In 2022, actually in December, I was sitting on my sofa one day, and suddenly I saw about 8 blue beings around me. And they just said, hey, we're here to chat with you, go into meditation. And I did. And they were Arcturians, and they told me, we're one of you, you're one of us, we're family. And there was a lot of communication with a few healers, etc. I saw home planet images, etc. And it was a spontaneous thing, the channeling for me. I didn't intend to channel. There was like kind of like when you feel like a cold is coming on, you've got that weird feeling in your body, but I could feel this kind of strange feeling of this very strange energy. It was coming down through the crown chakra, And that's how it feels now when I channel. I do have to surrender and the energy comes down through the crown chakra, but it was spontaneous. So I had that first encounter with the Arcturians, and then they were gone for a few months. And then this spontaneous channeling began, and they told me who they were. And I always ask them, do you stand in Christ consciousness? Are you in the middle of the dark and the light? And that was kind of the most important thing for me, was that what I was channeling was of love. It was nothing, never told me what to do. It was never controlling. In fact, when I ask questions and I don't do what the answers they give are, they never berate you. They come back and just keep guiding you out of love. So, but I will say the biggest shift for me was a few months after that first encounter. I was at Lake Como. I live in Italy, so it was near where I live. And I just spontaneously one Sunday, I went up to Lake Como and I was walking on the lake, and I looked up in the sky and there was a massive ship in the sky. I never imagined I would see that. And to this day, it was still quite astonishing. But standing on the lake, there was this massive ship in the sky, and my entire worldview kind of collapsed, because suddenly I realized, okay, we were not alone, and what was happening was real.
Well, let me ask you this:
to communicate with the ship itself, and
well, let me ask you, the blue beings, were they in your physical reality like the ship?
they were there briefly and they disappeared. They were, because it's quite difficult for them to shift into the third dimension. It's very difficult for them. So I think what I was, because I can see spirits anyway, I think that's why it was easy for me to see it. I see spirits in two ways. I can see them like I'm seeing you sometimes, in physical form, and other times I can see them where there's nothing there, but I can see what they're wearing, what their face looks like, and there's nothing there, but I can see it. And I've had people confirm this. So yeah,
that would have shifted my reality right then. Like I would have pooped my pants. Like I would have been like, what is going on?
I was walking on the lake and it completely collapsed my reality. But what was astonishing was that the ship itself was communicating. It wasn't the Arcturians on board the ship. The ship itself was communicating to me why it was there, what it was doing. As I walked around the lake, my phone battery went out. And this is kind of their signal now to me when they're nearby, because my phone will just turn off. The battery, even if it's fully charged, will just turn off. And it's happened several times since then. A couple of times at Lake Como, a few times at home. But when they're around, my battery will just turn off completely. So my battery on my phone died. I couldn't take any pictures after that. But the communication went on for, I would say, half an hour to an hour, back and forth, this telepathic communication. That's also how I communicate with animals. It's telepathic. But my entire worldview collapsed. And that evening, I came home. And the color purple is important in the Arcturian civilization. Their planet's called Pitola, and it's kind of a purplish blue. And that night, the sky sunset was purple. I've never seen a purple sky, but the entire sky was purple. And it was just another confirmation of what was going on, just another confirmation. And since then, they've come and gone. I mean, I can communicate with them when I want to, but they never intrude. They're there, but it's the Arcturian Council of Light. I've had other communications with Arcturian Council of One and Council of Elders. I believe they're involved with the Ascension process on Earth, which is humans moving from the mind into the heart. They have been through the Ascension process before, and they're watching us with great interest to see what decisions we choose as we go through this process.
Sure.
But I believe it's shifting from a mental construct into the heart construct, Newtonian third dimension to quantum energy. And that's kind of the biggest shift that humanity is going through now, is living out of the heart, completely out of the heart, a heart and mind balance, rather than a mind that's judgmental, split, past, present, future, etc., moving into a heart that never judges, that discerns instead. So
I love that.
yeah, it's discernment.
So when you saw the ship, it changes your paradigm. And
completely.
It's kind of funny because
completely, yeah.
I'm kind of experiencing that now with the drones that we're seeing.
Yeah.
I've sent you a couple of videos that I have.
I don't know.
What are your thoughts on them?
I don't know if you pay attention to Bashar. He's channeled by Daryl Anka. Do you watch him on YouTube at all?
A little bit, yeah.
Okay. What my intuition feels is that you have a connection with the Essassani yourself. And that's kind of what that's about. They're kind of winking at you to allow more communication to open. Because when the Arcturians came through a little bit before that, I began to see visions of some pretty ugly, what you'd call extraterrestrials. And I was told later that they were testing me to see how I reacted. And I didn't panic. I mean, some of them looked like Jabba the Hutt, some of them looked like blobs, some of them looked like monsters. I mean, it was a bit frightening, but I was being told that you were kind of being tested to see how you'd react. And it feels to me that they're testing you to see how open you are to more open contact, which is coming in a couple of years. They've been working with our governments for a long time, and our governments are frantically trying to figure out how they're going to break the news to the public that these are real, that this has been happening. We don't believe they're here because Earth's consciousness has been so dark that they haven't really been able to participate with us. Now that it's thinning, they are coming back. So
sure. Well, that's the thing, right? Like if you look, I don't know how true it is, but if you go on Instagram, you'll see these accounts that will have like not UFO, but the drone sightings, and so you'll see it all over the United States. It's like everywhere. It's like I don't know, like, so there's two that specifically stay over the house, and I don't know, because I live on the East Coast in the Northeast, because it's near DC, and there's a lot of activity here politically. I don't know if they're here all the time, or if they're because of that, or if it's because of their connection with me, right? So I don't really know. I don't really say, oh, it's because of Trey. The ego wants to say, oh, it's because of the Trey. No, I think it's trying to get our attention to something larger, that we're not alone, right? And it's funny because like the kids now are like, they're noticing it, and they're saying, oh, there's the drone. I'm like how crazy is 2025, or even like today's world, where we see these things in the sky and we're just like, oh, they're just drones. I'm like, can you imagine seeing this in the 1990s? Like, I don't know how I would react. Kind of similar to what you were talking about when you saw the craft in the sky. Like your paradigm totally changed. Like these kids are like, oh yeah, it's just drones up there. I'm like, like it literally looks like a spherical blob that is shifting in shape and color, and I'm like, you guys don't care? Like I'm just laughing at my kids, like, Dad, stop looking at the drones again. I'm like, they're not drones.
Yeah, I mean, I think some of it could be keeping people distracted as a way to fuel conspiracy theories, but I think that underlying that there is a bigger picture. There's a bigger story of they're all around us. I mean, we've been told that it's like an airport. We're living under an airport. I mean, you don't see them, but they are there. Now that I've had that sort of paradigm collapsed, when I walk around where I live, every once in a while, I'll be walking out in the open. I'll feel the goosebumps on my neck, and I'll just feel something flying over. It's amazing. Yeah.
Do you think it's political, like the government has created these things, or do you think they're interdimensional?
I think some of it is. I would say open your heart and allow your intuition to kind of discern what's being presented to you, because I think some of it could be. I mean, when you have conspiracy theorists, it kind of fuels their anger and it distracts them from the truth. And any distraction from the powers that be is going to be beneficial. So as the story is opening, use your intuition very deeply. And that's where your heart comes in. When I do medium readings or any kind of intuitive readings, it's the heart where the information comes. And that's what I would urge anyone who's listening or interested in intuition. Your heart is what you want to open and be aware of as your center of your intuition. Your mind translates what comes through, but your heart is where it comes. Your heart is the Wi-Fi. Think of it as the Wi-Fi of your experience. This is actually where your life experience is actually being beamed out of, is your heart. So it is not coming out of your mind. Your mind is filtering it, but your heart is where it is actually coming from. So I encourage anyone just to, whatever you're listening to in the news, really pay attention. Is this BS? Is this BS? Because it could be. It might not be, but be careful of what's actually being presented. Yeah.
Sure. Funny, I was just thinking about this last night about to your point about living in the heart more. I've always feel like I've always lived. I mean, a lot of us have been, mind centered and just kind of living from this analytical mind. And then the more that I read and look at, I look at mystical text or literature, and not take it for face value or so literal. Like, I think they're speaking about the same thing of like going more so into the heart, living into the heart. And when you self-love, when you have more self-love, that's where the growth happens. Now, my question to you is, living in this mind-centered world, how does one move more into the heart? Is it taking our awareness and placing it more on the heart space? Like, how does one live from the heart?
When you have a balance between the heart and mind, the heart is the intuition, the feminine, the mind is the masculine, the intellect. So that's when your wisdom truly flows. A lot of us believe that wisdom is actually coming just from intellect, but no, that's a heart that's closed. So it's really disconnecting a bit from the narrative that you've been told. It can be a little bit jarring and a little bit shocking in the beginning that you have to kind of disconnect from what your parents taught you, your religion, your schools, your colleagues, your friends. And it can be a bit frightening in the beginning when you do that, because you do have to disconnect from the story that you've been told. But loving yourself is really opening the door to the heart. That's where the Wi-Fi is. Like I said, an infinite intelligence is housed in the heart. This is where all the answers are. People ask me, how do you get that information? Well, it's available to everyone. And I do this work because I want people to realize too that mediums or intuitives are not rare. Everyone is using it. The awareness of it is something that we can all increase and improve upon and use more in our daily lives and really help us navigate our life better. But I
Mm,
do this work because I want people to know that they're doing it as well,
sure.
not to be different or special. It's like, no, everyone is using it.
Well, how do you walk through this world? Like when you walk down the streets, like what does that look like?
It can be a little strange. I mean, I do not get information that I'm not allowed to share or use. Thankfully, Source and Spirit does not, bombard me with stuff that I don't need to know, and I wouldn't ask for it anyway. But if I do have permission from someone, I can see their spirit guides. I can find out whether they have a parent in spirit or not. I can just sense relationships. Do they have siblings? Or is there a problem with their work? But only if I have permission. I'm not allowed to tune into people just randomly. That's you violate their free will, and there's a lot of punishment for that. So I wouldn't encourage people to open up their intuition to use it in that way. But it can be quite strange. I mean, I find myself running on a 10 to 15 second kind of advance. Um, I know what's happening before it happens. I don't know if anyone else can relate to that, but 10 or 15 seconds before it happens, I can see a car coming or a door slamming or something. I am in the supermarket and I'm finding myself standing in front of eggs when I forgot I didn't even needed eggs and don't know how I got there. It's that kind of weird kind of intuition, reaching down under a table before something falls off and catching it before it breaks. That's happened before. It's like a 10 to 15 second kind of advance. It's kind of strange. Yeah.
That is strange.
Yeah.
I kind of, is that like, deja vu almost?
Kind of, but it's sort of like your higher mind, which is access to the heart, is just giving you like a periscope view of what's coming. You're the
Mm,
submarine and the intuition's like the periscope, and it's
sure.
giving you kind of an advanced knowledge. Yeah.
Mm, I love that. I think that I have moments like I'm in the moment and I have this like, oh man, I've been here before. I think a lot of people have experienced that. Like,
Mm.
what are your thoughts on that? Is that like timeline skipping, or is it kind of like merging? Like, what is that? What is that?
I think what it is it's your higher mind is kind of telling you there's more than the time paradigm that you've lived with. That time is not what you think it is. It's not linear. And when you have a déjà vu, it's basically telling you that thing you remember thinking has always existed and you saw it in advance, but actually it's all now. But your mind is actually wanting you to wake up slowly to the fact that there is no linear time, that
Mm,
it's part of the 3D experience. So
sure.
these deja vus and people viewing parallel lives, etc., it's helping them understand that the veil is thinning and that time, while important, is only part of this one dimension. We are here. Only part of our soul is in this dimension. We're in
Sure.
all other dimensions. So lots of different places.
Well, speaking about dimensions and going back to the drones, right, or the crafts that we're seeing, there's a lot of them going around. What do you think their message is for us? What are they trying? They're trying to get our awareness to the ascension. What does that look like?
I think it's kind of like the theater lights are being turned on, like when you're after a movie and the lights are coming on, and they want us to see like smaller craft. I mean, drones are not necessarily terrifying to see. If a massive ship suddenly showed up over a major city, panic and who knows what would happen. So if you think about it from a storytelling point of view, it's probably safer to have a drip feed of smaller things, and then larger craft can show up. Perhaps they will appear longer and more distinctly. But drones are kind of things that we're used to, and I think it's like a drip feed. And it is also like the theater lights are being turned up. So you can kind of, from the darkness where we thought we were alone, to say, oh, wait a minute, did you see that blip? And soon the blips will be ships, and more contact. Yeah.
How do you think that will change our society? Like if you had to
Well,
dive into your intuition and look at 2025, like
they're
what do
not
you see?
here. They're not here to save us, and they're not here to kill us. I mean, there are nefarious extraterrestrials, but not these. Earth is under a quarantine. The project of Earth is for compassion, and they're not here to kill us. They're here to help us. They have been through Ascension before, and time is an illusion. It's all now. So the Arcturians, for example, they have been through Ascension before, and it was opening the heart. That was their experience. Now they want to watch us and help us to see how we move through Ascension. What choices do we make in comparison to what choices they made? Kind of like you look at someone who attends Harvard, what classes did they take and what path did they take? And they went to Harvard, I don't know, 20 years ago, and the niece or nephew goes there now. They're watching us to kind of help us to see what choices we're making. And they're here to help. Again, free will on Earth cannot be violated. So they cannot tell us what to do. They're here to help us. You have to ask permission first for help, and they will give it to you. And they will not berate you if you don't follow through with what they tell you to do as advice.
Well, do you think they live in the same universe as us, or do you think they're like interdimensional like beings? If that makes sense.
They're different dimensions. Our soul is in the third dimension here, and we're shifting to the fourth and the fifth. They're more in the fifth and sixth and upper dimensions where we can't see them with our physical eyes. People are being able to see them now more and more because the veil is thinning, but they are in a different dimension completely. Yeah,
Sure.
but it's all on top of each, like a Russian doll. It's all over one here and now space.
Yeah. What is their like when you're channeling them? What is their messages for us?
Unconditional love, which is balance, the dark and the light. When I began channeling them, you can see my hands. I've got my fingers like this and my back fingers like this and my thumbs. One of the first things that came through was a symbol that looks like a triangle. That was the Arcturians when I began channeling them. If you look at the Giza pyramids, that's the exact same shape of the pyramid. What does that have to do with, Ascension? The dark and the light are the two bases of the pyramid, which is balance. And the third point is where you take your consciousness based on that balance. I have lived in Italy for about 10 years now, and I finally went to see the Last Supper painting, which is in Milan. I saw it on Wednesday. Finally have seen it. And if anyone is fascinated by the connection between Leonardo da Vinci and Egypt, go to see the painting or look at it online, because there are hidden codes in the painting. For example, the triangle of Jesus, the picture of him, and then Mary Magdalene, etc. But it's all the triangle, that basis. And the triangle is the most stable form in the universe. And stability is basically balance, right? So the dark and the light are equal. You can't let your life experience push you into one or the other. Most of us are living in an unbalanced paradigm of trauma or victimhood. But when we get to the center and we have that balance, then we have all of our power. And this is kind of what humans are opening up to, is their full power.
Mm-hmm. So you said you channel Yeshua as well. How do you discern that those messages, or how do you know it's coming from him?
It feels different. And again, I had practiced as a medium for several years, and you can feel the difference of the energy. And the words that come through are different, and the message is different, and it just feels different in your body. There's a different frequency in your body. I know some people, they have a energetic signature that they feel when it's Mother Mary or something. And I don't see them in a religious sense. I don't see them at all in a Catholic or Christian sense, although I was raised Catholic. I see them as ascended masters that have nothing to do with religion. So some people might be a bit like, I don't want to work with Mary Magdalene or Mother Mary or whatever because of the religious sense, but actually I see them as standalone ascended masters. But I can feel the difference, and it does take a bit of discernment to get to that point. Again, a lot of intuition. You kind of think, well, am I making this up? Is it fake? But when the messages resonate and when the advice comes through and they know what you're going through, and It's hard to describe, but it's just a gut feeling. You know what it's there to guide you. And we're here to play with who you want to play with. We've been told that we're singular and alone and separate, but who do you want to play with? You can play with Mary Magdalene if you want, or Mother Mary, or the Buddha, or whatever. They're not gone. They're within your heart. That's why the heart is so important.
Hmm.
But who do you want to play with? To help you in your journey.
Sure. Have you ever read the Course in Miracles?
I have.
What are your thoughts on that? Because Yeshua was supposed to have channeled that text.
The whole book is really talking about balance, and unconditional love is balance. It's the dark and the light. I think it's a wonderful text. I think it's got a lot of benefits, especially the daily practices. Reading it is one thing, but there's like 365 lessons in there. But it is really about balancing, which is what is in your heart. You don't need to balance it through hard work. You have to just let go of the story. Dying to the story is what is important and necessary. We cling to a story. I was born here. My parents did this to me. I had this financial flow. I lost my job at this age, or this person left me, or whatever. And that story is the distortion of that unconditional love that we all are. And that's kind of what humanity has to do, is out of the mind, go into the heart, where the heart doesn't have a story. It is the Wi-Fi. It's everything. The mind loves stories. It loves to kind of cling to an identity that keeps itself separate from others. But in the heart, you don't have that separation.
Sure. Do we keep our minds when we pass away from this plane, right? Like, because I feel like, what is the difference between our mind when we're human and then like the mind when we no longer have a body?
We let go of all the judgment and the negativity that we can pick up on this planet. We're allowed to pick that up on this planet because we have to learn lessons. So in this life, we can have, resentment against someone, or resentment against self, or anger, or whatever, or kinds of judgment. But when you make your transition, you go back and you let go of all that judgment. When I bring through family members, they're always saying, spend that money I left you. Quit that job you don't like, do the traveling, go to Italy, take that vacation. They're always urging people to just, stop worrying so much, which is judgment basically. But we let go of all the judgment and we go back to the pure energy of unconditional love, which is the dark and the light balanced. Religions have made the dark and the light into bad and good, but the dark is necessary so that you can actually shine light into it. We hide things in the dark, we're trying to deny it in ourselves. But when we actually are in the light and we can love it, and then love all the parts of ourselves that we don't feel are lovable, we can then stay in that balance of who we truly are. And that can be hard to do when you look at it through the old eyes, but we have to look at things through new eyes, and the heart is the new eyes.
Sure. What about, the course also speaks to this being a dream, and that we are the dreamer and we're creating all of this for ourselves, and forgiveness is a huge proponent of that teaching. It's actually the main foundation of the teaching. What are your thoughts on that? Right? Like, because I've had experiences where I have been in a dream recently, and this is before I started reading the course. I've had the course, the book, for a really long time. Something about big books and thin pages really turned me off. Maybe because of my my background.
It can sit on people's shelves for a long time. I think it's pretty famous among people who've read it.
Yeah, well, growing up too, in religion, the Bible was huge and it had thin pages, and it just seemed like, I don't want to read another Bible. But I'm diving more back into that work. But there have been experiences in dreams where I was, I had the monsters come after me, right? The nightmares. And there was something, a part of me in that moment was aware and was like, I need to be gentle towards this darkness. It is a part of me. I didn't know where this realization came from. It was like in the moment, I was like, it's happened on two separate occasions. It was like I was being mean to a person, and first it was the darkness coming towards me, and I was like, I need to love this. I need to be accepting of this. This is a part of me. And then separate event was I was being mean to a person, and like I had this realization. I was like, I need to be nicer to this person because this is just me in this dream. Like, this is just an aspect of me.
It's you. I was just going to say that your sweater has the entire answer to your question. What you're wearing, I am, because I am is the dark and the light, and that is basically the hardest thing for us to accept when we have an egoic physical mind balance, because I don't want to let go of that judgment of that person who hurt me. But actually, like the tsunami, it's actually rebalancing you to who you truly are, back to the I am. All experience is shared. So some people might say, well, I had this abusive relationship, or I had that disaster I survived. But actually, all of us share the experiences at the soul level. But what I wanted to say, which might blow some people's minds, is when you wake up in this reality, you're actually going to sleep. And when you go to sleep at night, you're actually waking up. So we are dreaming right now. You and I are actually in a dream at this moment. Our souls are guiding this dream. But when we go to sleep at night in this reality, we're actually going home, which is where we go when we make our transition. So it's actually the opposite. We are dreaming. The course is correct. This is a dream. This is a physical dream, to see how well you can remember who you truly are, the I am, like your sweater says. We come forth, we forget we are divine, we forget we are unconditional love, we have free will to choose anything we want. And how did you do in that dream? Did you remember your divinity? Did you forget it? How much did you bring back? Did you treat others like you treat yourself? A lot of people don't realize that everyone is just you in a different body. And when you know that, you don't hurt people. You don't hurt them in that way, because you only hurt them when you think it's separate. You only judge them when you believe that your judgment doesn't hurt you, but actually you're hurting yourself.
Sure.
So yeah.
So people, I can hear them saying this now. Well, I don't remember, I don't remember anything when I sleep or I dream, and I don't know where I go. I don't leave. It's blackness, and then I wake up back into this reality. What is your answer to that?
I would say that if you don't remember, then you don't need to remember. Perhaps you have to learn some more things in the dream so that you can then remember what's happening on the other side. But I would say that if you're not remembering your dreams, I would say that you probably have to let go of more judgment in the dream, so that when you go home, when you're sleeping, that you'll understand more. But I think your soul is always showing you what you need to remember. So if you're not seeing those dreams when you're dreaming, when you're dreaming now, there's a reason for it. I mean, I dream quite vividly. I mean, they've come through much more vividly now that I work as a medium and an intuitive. But I don't really pay attention to them so much. I just I let them go, and I'm paying more attention to how I'm doing in the dream, because this is where I've forgotten and I have to remember. So it's good. It's supposed to be a fun dream, a fun experience, the Earth school, but it is one of the toughest schools in the universe. It's one of the toughest.
Sure. So it's funny. I feel like this reality can be a mirror, and what you put into it, you'll receive. I've had to learn this lesson the hard way many times, where I thought I had to be a certain way, very egocentric, very harsh, very cold, non-loving, strong, bold warrior type, right? And all of these things. And that's the reality that I received back. And it wasn't until recently where I started doing a lot of different heart-centered meditations, where I've activated the heart and started working with the energy setters in the body, doing some Joe Dispenza work and activating those, clearing those emotional blockages and transmuting that in the heart space, but being able to love more in this reality. Like, I've seen a total change in my reality.
Completely.
100%.
Yeah. The heart, he agrees with you. The dog agrees with you. That's why he's barking. Exactly. I mean, if you can remember that it is a mirror, I mean, people will, go on and on about how they were dating someone or in a relationship and this person did this to them, did that to them. But if you can get beyond the fact that it's actually you, it's only one experience, one energy, one ocean of experience, then you start to treat yourself better, and then you're treated better because of the fact that you love yourself more. That's why self-love is so important. You're being given that all the time, but most of us have pushed it aside and given that power away to others, or a natural disaster as a victim. Many people go through I hate to say it now in Los Angeles. I hope people there can move through. What I've been seeing on the news has been terrifying and
Sure.
heart-rending. I know parts of LA, not that well, but it's heart-rending to see what's going on out there. However, in a disaster like that, you've got to remember that it is all one energy, that even though you may lose in the physical world, your love in your heart is the infinity. And that's hard to say to someone who just lost their home. I mean, I wouldn't be able to say that to someone. I would have to say, you need to grieve this first. You got to grieve this first. You really can't get to that point. It's something that you have to work towards. Yeah.
Well, yeah, just going through grief recently with Gracie passing, right? Like,
Yeah, you have to
if
honor
you
the
said
grief.
any of that, if you said anything that to me, I'd be like, no, right? I've read all the books, right?
Exactly.
All the conspiracy theories or all the, this is a virtual reality, this is a dream. And then, but when you lose something that is a part of you, like your self identity, that part of you, like we have neural networks
You have to grieve it.
that are
Yeah.
created by the people in our lives. And when that dies, a part of you is dying. Like a part of your reality is
Yeah.
literally just dissolving from your essence, from who you are. And there's a death associated with that. And it's not easy. So the people that are losing possessions, I mean, we are very materialistic. We think they are ours. They think we do identify that as us.
Mm.
Even, I don't care how much work you do. Like there's a process, a grieving process where, you have to move through that. And I think it can be helpful to keep this in mind, but it will not eliminate that grief whatsoever.
No, and you have to honor the grief because it tells you the depth of the love that you hold for that animal or person or even possession. It is all one energy, but the grief process is important to go through in that situation. You cannot jump, you cannot bypass, you can't tell someone, namaste, it's only physical possessions, because there are irreplaceable photographs in there. There are pets that didn't get out of the house. There are heirlooms that went up in smoke. I mean, there are things, it's easy to just kind of dismiss that, but you cannot. You have to grieve. You've got to honor that grief. And you have to surround yourself with people that will also allow you to honor it and never tell you how long you need to grieve for or the depth of your grief, because only you know that. And I believe too that grief is a very empowering experience because you then know what you need in that situation. No one can tell you that. Your heart can tell you, but no one outside of you can say, you should be over this by now. Your pet passed away a year ago. You shouldn't be grieving. It's like, no, grief is its own beast. It comes and goes. It comes in waves. And I think it's an empowering experience to tell yourself, no, I need more time. I want to honor this love of this pet or person or whatever experience. And again, I think it's empowering to actually stand in your own power and say, actually, my heart will tell me when this grieving process is, I don't like to use the word over, I would say eased and soothed, because you always miss a pet. I've had pets who've passed away 20 years ago, and I'm able to communicate with them now, but that's unusual. But I still grieve them too. I wish I could hold them, walk them down the street and hug them or whatever. But I think the grieving process is actually very powerful to self control, to really wake up and say, actually, I know what I need and no one else does. But surround yourself with a supportive group, but also know when your heart is telling you, I still need more time.
Sure. Honor that. I think losing something that we think or associate the I with can be our greatest teacher, because it shows us
Yeah.
where we didn't appreciate it in the moment, right? Like my dog, like Gracie, I cannot believe I say this, but she has been my greatest teacher thus far.
Mm,
Out of all the books, all the teachers, all the masters, my dog has been my greatest
yeah.
teacher. She's an enlightened master in my view, because she was a representative of unconditional love. Like I can read a text about Jesus. I can read text about Buddha. I can read all the things, but a real life example was a dog. It didn't matter how many times I walked through the door that day. Every time I walked through that door, she approached me and welcomed me in a way that was unconditional love. And it didn't matter if I yelled at her for bringing my sock from upstairs downstairs and leaving it there, and totally not being, in the moment with her, but just being, caught in my mind about the things that I got to do and all the stress and anxieties that is associated with life. But having her there, I wasn't always there with her. And after her passing, I had this realization of like, she, every time, like she was in my space, like she was just there. And like for the last couple of months, I've been doing a lot of men's work, which helped me get back into my heart, where I was able to have moments of recognition and awareness of this and be able to love her more.
Yeah.
I'm very thankful for that. But, we lose these individuals, these pieces of who we think we are. And it can be our greatest teacher, because then we start to, it like wakes us up. It's like an alarm clock. It's like, all right, think
It's
about other
rebalancing.
people. Yeah.
It's
How
rebalancing.
about the
Yeah.
people in your life that you're not fully connecting with in the moment, or you're taking for granted, or you're not really cultivating a deeper relationship where you know that you can, right? You're holding back a piece of yourself for whatever reason. And so for me, it's like, all right, we just got a dog. It came faster than what we expected. However, like,
Perfect timing.
Perfect timing. And
Perfect timing. Yeah.
and things unfolded the way they were supposed to. And the way that I'm going to freaking love this dog is because of Gracie, essentially.
Yeah. And it's funny because I felt it was going to be a male dog, and I felt within 6 months, I remember we chatted and I thought, but the family's grief, I don't know if 6 months it's going to be too long, because I know you guys all missed her terribly, and you each had a unique connection with her, and she presented a different side of herself to each of you. I can see that and feel it. So this new addition she's going to flow through him, and he has his own personality. But yeah, just give the same love you have for Gracie to him and more. And I think that she knows you're going to appreciate her even more now through him, because it's true. We don't take it. We don't appreciate what we have until we perhaps lose it. So
Yeah. And it's unfortunate that it takes things like this to happen for us to realize that. But that's like the gift. It's like the gift.
The gift.
And
Yeah.
and I feel like she came here to give us that gift, and to help us realize what unconditional love is, and then to move forward in our lives, like, and find areas where we're not fully showing up and giving other people that gift.
And that's within the heart. If we are estranged from parts of ourselves, then it's going to show up outside of us. And if we can just look into our heart and know that we're loved and guided, whatever it is, it can't be that scary. It might be scary in the beginning, but it will ease. But there are parts of ourselves that we're estranged from, or have denied, or thrown away. And life is teaching you what you are throwing away, what you're judging. And it will show up to you until you stop judging it. So,
because you're judging yourself, right?
Exactly. And like your sweater says, I am, you're judging the I am, because you are everything. Yeah. Yeah. It's astonishing. And again, if you live in your mind, it's easy to believe that you're separate, but in the heart, you are the I am, and you go, oh, I am that too. Okay. All right. I can accept that.
Well, people like hear self-love, right? And judgment and self-judgment. And they're like, okay, I won't judge myself. It's not egocentric. Like, I love Trey. I'm going to get Trey all the things. I'm going to go take, have a nail day, hair day, all these things. I mean, you can do those things, but it's like, that isn't really what self-love is. Self-love is like me loving David, right? It's me loving David because that is loving me, right?
One thing that came through from Yeshua a couple of years ago, which I thought was really helpful, was each of us have a frequency. Our soul has a frequency that does not exist anywhere in the universe. Each of us have a signature frequency. This is how a medium can communicate with someone's relative or whatever. And he said that if you love that frequency because of its uniqueness, that is an aspect of self-love that will guide you tremendously. So if you struggle with self-love, we grew up in a society where there's competition, especially in America, where kids from a very young age are pitted against each other. You got to compete for sports, you got to compete for grades, you got to compete for jobs, etc. And we forget that we are not generic. We are actually completely unique. And if you can love yourself for that fact that your frequency does not exist anywhere in the universe, no one else has that frequency, that is one reason why you can love yourself. Yeah. And it's really important to remember how unique you are. Yeah.
I love that. David, my friend, dude, I loved every second of this. I would really love to send people over your way. How can they connect with you?
Sure. My website is infinitehumanheart.com, or Instagram is David Patrick Medium.
And lastly, before we go, what's on your heart that you want to share with the people today?
I think, as 2025 starts, we've had some pretty rough patches in the US at the moment. We've got a president coming in that some people support and some people don't. I think what I would say is pay attention to your heart and don't get distracted by the narrative you're seeing in the news, etc., on social media. Put your phone down and open your heart. I think that's what I would tell people this year, is to open your heart and put the phone down. And don't give your attention away to the narrative that is now becoming more shrill to keep your focus away from your heart. So I would say, as this year unfolds, keep your heart open.
Perfect. David, thank you so much, brother.
Thank you, Trey.